what I do is definitely, in my opinion, and I know WFII would need to hear this, but it's advocacy journalism.
Sure.
I'm advocating for something. I'm advocating for greater respect for artists. I'm advocating for greater respect of our history here in the city. And I wanted to use whatever platform I had to redirect the narrative to what matters, not just what the city wants to sell us.
Welcome back, y'all, to From the Kitchen Table, the show where people come over to my house and hang out for a bit. My name is Patrick Armstrong. I am your host, and today I am joined by Indianapolis legend and resident historian, Kyle Long. How you doing today, Kyle?
I appreciate it. I'll try to live up to that introduction, but thank you so much for inviting me here. I know you put a great amount of thought and care into how you curate this series, so it was meaningful to get an invitation from you, because I know you're not just trying to create content just for the sake of creating content. This is something that you have a strategy behind and you're very intentional. So appreciate it.
Well, I really appreciate that. For folks that who are tuning in who may or may not know who you are, do you mind just sharing just a little bit about yourself?
Sure. My name is Kyle Long. I grew up around Indianapolis in the suburbs in Indiana, moved around a little bit as a kid, mostly grew up on the west side, kind of on the county line of Marion County. I guess my entry into sort of the world of arts and culture came actually 20 years ago when I started DJing. And for many years, that's all people here knew me for, was as a DJ. That work as a DJ led to a career I had no idea I would be capable of doing, which is being a music journalist. So yeah, now I think I haven't pursued DJing as a full-time work since the pandemic. So I think now that's pretty much how people know me. I work for WFII now. I produce 2 shows, Cultural Manifesto and Echoes of Indiana Avenue. And I think that's pretty much what I'm known for in the community today, if anyone does know who the hell I am.
For sure. Do you still DJ? Do you still play
Sometimes,
some shows? Okay.
but it's like few and far between.
Totally.
Every once in a blue moon. I actually gave away a bunch of my equipment to someone looking to get into it recently. So yeah, I'm
Nice.
kind of at a point where I'm probably not going to do it anytime soon. I used to DJ across the street here at the parties, the Bach parties.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, I love it. We got here way too late. Moved in way too late for that. Do you still get introduced as DJ Kyle Long?
Oh yeah, there's some
Okay.
people, especially in a certain age range, who don't even acknowledge anything I've done outside of that world.
Sure.
Which is good. I appreciate that because it shows that it left some kind of impact on them. And I still
Totally.
get hit up for gigs because what I was doing was a niche thing here. And I think people don't know if there are other options when they're looking for a certain type of music. So people still do call me that. And I proudly wear that moniker. DJ
Totally.
culture influenced everything I did as a journalist. So,
Totally.
It's something that is meaningful to me. So,
Well, and
yeah.
I think when you step back behind the tables, like you are going to, like it's a special moment for if you're coming back out. And so I think it carries a little bit extra weight if you ever say yes to a gig that comes up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we have never done this segment on this show, and I've actually only done it once at our live show for Conversation Piece this past Wednesday, but I think it's going to be the segment that I lead off most of my shows with here on out, and it's called The Dream Machine. So the purpose of the Dream Machine, it was like just anybody who wants to like release something, is dreaming of whatever, can like put it into, don't have to say it out loud, don't have to share it at all, but just something like the idea of being able to let go of something in a collective space.
Mm-hmm.
So my first question in the Dream Machine is, are you a dreamer? Like when you go to sleep, do you have like vivid dreams, or do you have dreams often?
Sure. They're not always pleasant, but
Sure.
I do. I do just about every night wake up and remember little fragments of things.
Okay. Any particular dreams that you last have that you're willing to share about?
I'll share an old one because I think this probably says something about me. Back in my record collector days, I used to be a really dedicated record collector. I would have dreams about finding, Holy Grail records, or
Sure.
sometimes imagine records that didn't exist.
Okay.
Right. And that always stuck with me, like this dream where I'm finding all these records that contain this music that never existed, but I was so excited to find it in my dream. And that just intrigued me for some reason.
Was there ever disappointment when you woke up and you're
Oh,
like,
yeah.
oh man,
Yeah, of course. Yeah, yeah.
Do you remember any of the records that you dreamt of as existing that didn't exist that you're like, man, I would love to see that come to
Yeah,
fruition?
I don't know if you know. This is somewhat obscure, but Sun Ra. He's a
Oh, yeah.
really
Yeah.
important figure in jazz history. He played experimental music, led this huge band that embraced themes of ancient Egypt and the future and space. Some people call him the father of Afrofuturism. I got into his music at an early age, and his records were impossible to find. A lot of them were handmade. He didn't always record for major record labels. His music was kind of on the margins for a long time. So yeah, anyone who was a fan of his back in the day, you know, you were on a constant hunt to find his music because he released well over 100 albums, many of which were in very limited numbers. So yeah, that was always an obsession of mine.
Well, and we have some of our jazz musicians that played with him in the orchestra, correct?
Yeah,
Or, like,
James
filled in?
Spalding.
Okay,
Yep.
yeah.
Charles Tyler.
I love that connection. Did he ever come through Indy specifically?
He
to
played
play?
one time, and I might not be 100% accurate on the date, but I believe it was in 1957 at the
Damn.
Senate Avenue YMCA, right
Okay.
on Indiana Avenue. The building is no longer there. It's right by the Kroger downtown. Yeah, he played. It was, and there's all kinds of rumors and legends that Wes Montgomery sat in with him. There was supposedly a tape of it, but it's never surfaced. But that was the only. He played in Bloomington in the 70s and released an album of that concert. But yeah, that was his sole appearance here. And James Spalding was in the band at that time, who's still with us, one of the greatest living legends of Indianapolis music, played in the orchestra in his early years.
Nice. I love that. Thank you for sharing that.
Of course.
I'm wondering, is there something that you're dreaming about right now, whether it be for yourself or for the city?
I'll go with for myself. Yeah. You know, I've kind of been off and on working on a documentary project about a record label here called Lamp. It's been called Naptown's Motown. It was a soul music label that was formed in 1969. And yeah, I'm just always hoping there will be some little push to get that fully off the ground. I've done a little filming for it, but there's been no real push to make it happen. So
Nice.
yeah,
Okay.
still looking for that push, whatever that might be.
Do you know what that is?
Yeah,
that you
I
might be
don't
looking
know
for?
exactly.
Okay.
I don't know. It takes some sort of institutional support, I think, you know?
Yeah.
And right now, I just don't want to wait. I don't want to exert too much energy on that because,
Sure.
you know, I like to just maintain the quality of what I'm doing, what I can do now. And I think it'll come at some point. You know, you just always you kind of keep it on the back burner, but keep it moving forward when you can. And things will
Totally.
line up and I'll be ready to go.
Well, I
But
think
thank you for asking. How
No,
to support.
totally. Yeah,
Appreciate
absolutely.
it.
I can't help but be
Yeah.
like, how can I help you?
No, I appreciate that.
And I think I just asked a question the other night about like what's the process that you wish would take more time, and I think this is one that you wish that maybe could be sped up a little bit from the institutional perspective, maybe just from like a support angle. But I think a project like this, I think benefits from a little bit of slow play in terms of like what more can we uncover, what more can we
Yeah.
figure out how to put into
Yeah.
this and create and craft.
And this would be a new medium for me to work in, film,
yeah.
documentary film. And I need to improve my skills, my storytelling abilities to get to that point where I can make this a worthwhile project. You know,
Sure.
I don't want to invest all this time on it and disappoint all the musicians and people involved with the label with a product that no one wants to watch. You know, you want it to
Totally.
have impact, you want it to be exciting, and that takes a lot of skill
Yeah.
and a kind of genius. So I'm working to kind of better understand that medium and how I can translate the story into that medium.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that perspective because I think a lot of people, when you're doing a project like this, maybe not a lot of people, but I know of people who, because it is like a project for yourself, but you're working with other people and you're stewarding these stories. And I appreciate the just perspective of, you know, I want to make sure that we're doing this to the level, like the quality, but also like the mindfulness of the people involved who may or may no longer be with us, and like, you know, and how we tell that story. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, and this is not particularly well known in Indianapolis, but in music circles outside the city, outside the United States, the artist, the music is revered.
Yeah.
So, you know, the audience for this is in some cases, you know, international, and you want to create something that could be distributed on that level and be respected by those people in Europe or Asia or Latin America who appreciate this record label and the music that came out of it.
Well, thanks for coming with me into the Dream Machine, and
my
I feel
pleasure.
like you just gave me a perfect segue into my next question. So you grew up in Avon.
Yeah, basically. Yeah.
I was wondering what piqued your interest most when you first learned about Lata Mangeshkar.
Oh, okay, sure. Lata Mangeshkar was a profound singer
Yeah.
of film music in India. She's like the queen of Bollywood music. She died a couple years ago, but the Guinness Book of World Records, I think, once named her the most recorded voice in human history. She would just day after day go to the studio, record music for Bollywood films and other regional cinema in India, and just became this iconic voice in human history, right?
Yeah.
I think I read a description of her kind of outlining what I just said. And I was like, here's this person who is this ubiquitous voice for billions of people on this planet, and I'd never heard it. So at that time, this was in the 90s, there was a growing community of South Asian people and businesses on the west side of Indianapolis.
Yep.
At that time, there were several little grocery stores kind of dotted around that area. And at that time, those stores this was before Amazon, right?
Right.
These stores provided everything. You know, you could go in there and buy a suitcase, you could buy converters for your appliances, so you could plug the curling iron you brought from home into the socket here in the US, just silly stuff like that. And they also sold music. And if you would go into one of these Indian grocery stores back in the day, the walls would be lined with cassette tapes, right?
Okay.
Mostly of film music, Bollywood film music. Some of it was classical music and other kinds of popular music, but 95% of it was film music. So I went into one of these stores one day, asked the shopkeeper if they had any tapes of Lata Mangeshkar. Little did I know that she was probably on every one of those tapes. This is how
Sure.
prolific she was as a vocalist. That's not an exaggeration. She sang on almost every film soundtrack that was composed through a specific period of time. So the woman kind of like humored me, right? The shopkeeper, she went and grabbed a couple tapes, and I don't know, it just spoke to me at that time. And also, you know, I was raised by a single mother, working class family. We didn't have tons of money. My music tastes were very much informed by my budget.
Sure.
That's
totally.
how I got into record collecting. You know, it was like I could either buy a tape or a CD for like $15, or I could go to Goodwill and buy 15 records, right? So these tapes were also super cheap at the Indian grocery store, these old Bollywood tapes. And yeah, I just developed an obsession with it. You know, Bollywood music is sort of a synthesis of popular music from around the world. It's rooted in Indian folk and classical music, but it incorporates they were competitive, all these composers who were writing film soundtracks. And, you know, when disco came out, they incorporated disco into the music. Bossa Nova music from Brazil like underpins a lot of the rhythmic structure of some of the pop songs from the 60s and 70s. Psychedelic music, when the Beatles blew up internationally, you know, psychedelic music became a big part of the language of Indian cinema in the 70s. So I immediately related to the music. Sure. And it was like this new world of music that I didn't realize existed. It was a new world to me, right? And it allowed me to kind of like have those, you know, like the first time you hear Jimi Hendrix, it's like, you know, all the hair on your arm stands up and you're just like awestruck. It allowed me to have those moments all over again with this new world of music that, you know, I was able to enter into thanks to the kindness of these shopkeepers who would let me literally spend hours going through the tapes one by one and, you know, really encouraged me in some cases to continue doing that. So yeah, that's how I got into Lata Mangeshkar, through the Indian grocery stores
Totally.
on Lafayette Road.
Do you
38th
remember
Street.
which store like you first went into to grab that first tape?
That
or the
store
first tapes, I suppose?
Yeah, that store is no longer there. But this is one of my favorite restaurants. On 38th Street, there's a restaurant called the Wanakita. It's an El Salvadoran restaurant. Right across the street, there's a massive strip mall. There's an Ethiopian restaurant there, a Peruvian restaurant there. There used to be a Best Buy there. And it was just a little hole-in-the-wall grocery store.
Okay.
Yeah, that had a massive wall of cassette tapes.
That's incredible. Did you like set up time to be like, okay, I'm going to hit up this store, this store, and this store? And if you did that, was there a lot of crossover as to what people were carrying, or were there like you knew you could find, oh, this spot has more of the Brazilian music that I'm looking for, or whatever you might be getting into at that time?
Yeah, at that time on Lafayette Road, it was predominantly South Asian grocery stores. Sure. Yeah, so if I went into that neighborhood, that's pretty much what I would find. Although there were some East African spots opening up in the late 90s. Yeah, no, I would go in there definitely with a mission. You know, you would find, you would start to recognize, oh, this composer is really interesting. You know, so you would go and look at the covers, and if they were wearing like bell bottoms and and you know, you'd be like, oh, this might have some funky music on it. And also that was around the time that hip hop was really fascinated with sampling Bollywood.
Sure.
You know?
Okay.
So that was also a thing happening, and that kind of. I guess that kind of like cemented my interest in it.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
I was like, oh, it's not just me that is obsessed with this music. It's like there's this whole community of DJs and producers in the United States that are also probably doing the same thing I am, you know,
Totally.
going into little grocery shops and digging through the tapes and CDs.
Did you find that other people you were interacting with, well, you were pretty young at this time when you were going in
Sure.
and finding this music, I think. Were you finding like other people, like friends or people that you knew, when you would you share this music with other people and like to get their reaction, see how they were feeling about it, and how was that reaction?
People in my immediate circle weren't particularly interested in it, right?
Sure.
At that time, I was working a lot of really lame jobs, like working at a gas station, whatever.
Yeah.
And I would play the tapes, you know, while I was in there. And yeah, it would elicit a lot of very negative response back in the day in Avon. Yeah, so, you know, the thing is, eventually I started, you know, coming into contact with more people from that community. And it became a point of bonding, right? Especially like I worked for many years as a third shift grocery stocker at the Meijer in Avon, right?
Okay.
And yeah, I would really bond. Like I remember there was a Pakistani couple that worked there, and we would really form these like tight bonds just because I would go up and talk to them about music. And, you know, as I entered into the world of DJing and eventually music journalism, I think those experiences I had with people really helped me understand the way that music can, you know, not to be like overly simplistic about it, but music can remove obstacles in human communication in a way that we need as a society.
Totally.
And I think I saw that on a micro level. And I always wondered, like, if that were, you know, how could that get expanded into some bigger vision and maybe have more of a footprint in the city, you know?
Yeah. Did your taste in music or what you wanted to listen to change because of that experience and because of what you were going out to see? Or is it just like an addition to?
I think my taste in music was actually formed by the Indianapolis Public Library. You know, again, my taste was influenced by my budget, which was nothing.
And you could get like 80 things at a time, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
I think it was 78 was the limit. So I would have with tapes and CDs, it was 12. But with records, the library, I mean, a lot of libraries still have their record collection. Chicago, Detroit, a lot of big cities. Indianapolis Public Library got rid of their record collection, but they used to have a great record collection there, and you could check out 78 records, I believe. So I would go and, you know, load up the crates. And I remember this vividly. I, for some reason, checked out a record by Tito Puente, the great Latin band leader. And the music was so powerful. It was as powerful as like Public Enemy and the hip hop NWA that I'd listen to. It was as powerful as the punk bands, the Clash or the Ramones or whoever. But it was artistic on a level that music wasn't. And it was also abstract. It was very like, there was elements of it that seemed almost surreal, but it was this music that hit so hard. And I think at that point, it just, my whole DNA was rewired when I heard Tito Puente, and it just sent me in a whole new world musically.
Do you remember what specifically, like where that power was coming from for you, or was it just the feeling of like, there's something different here?
Oh, the rhythm,
I need to
rhythm.
Okay.
I mean, he was a genius in the way he played the timbales, the way he wrote rhythm parts for his band. It was unique. You know, and obviously it influenced Carlos Santana. The song Oye Como Va comes from Tito Puente. You know, it influenced Miles Davis. You know, his music was highly artistic. It was highly rhythmic. And I just became like a junkie for that kind of sound. and got into Brazilian music and got deeply into the New York Latin scene that he really became popular in, and got into Willie Colon and Hector Lavoe and the whole Fania Records catalog, and just would go to the Mexican record shops out on East Washington Street and look for those, classic salsa tapes whenever I could find them. They didn't stock a lot of those at the Mexican shop, but I would grab them when they did.
But you'd be looking for sure.
Absolutely.
I'm sure there are probably many, but especially somebody who like has grown up in this scene and been to a lot of places that maybe aren't here any longer.
Mm-hmm.
Like, is there a specific place that you miss that you wish that you were really sad to see go?
Sure. I don't know if I'd say, there are a lot of those places that I'm sad
Totally.
about, but there's one that was extremely influential to me. I don't know if I would go there today. It would probably be a little weird, but when I was a teenager, there was this punk rock collective called Sitcom on the corner, on this, like, at the time, dilapidated building at 46 in College. A group of like high school kids, teenagers, rented space in this building. It was falling apart. It was probably about to be condemned. I can't emphasize how horrible this place was. But this group of teenage kids, high school students, somehow got an adult to sign a lease. They rented this space out and would bring really influential cultural figures into the space, people in punk music, like the band Bikini Kill I saw there, who engineered the Riot Grrrl movement, this feminist punk rock movement in the 1990s. It was about the size of your kitchen. I was young at the time, and here I was in this space that was not approved by the city. It was illegal. They were operating illegally. It was managed and operated by kids like me. And they were bringing these important cultural figures to our city to play in this tiny room to about 50 sweaty high school kids on a school night. Those experiences there really informed how I operate in the sort of worlds that I exist in, whether that was being a DJ or the journalism I do. It's very rooted, even though I'm not like a diehard punk rock music fan, that culture, that DIY culture of punk rock, it really is to this day a starting point for me in everything I do. It's like, what can I do? What do I have materially at my hands that I can make something happen with? And it can be as big as you want it to be, as big as your dream is, and those moments at that venue, I probably only went there like 20 times.
That's a lot of times.
Maybe it is okay. It felt like I always wanted to be there more. But yeah, those moments still are so fresh in my mind and really just reshaped the way I saw the limitations I saw in my ability to get involved and become someone who hosts cultural events or creates things in the city.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that. As you were talking about it, it made me think about like those first maybe couple years of Trees and how they, I feel like, just said, we're going to do this.
Exactly.
And it's probably a little bit more legally okay to do at that time. But like, just, we want to build something. It doesn't exist here. And we're going to put people on that others, like the majority of the city or even the state maybe, don't know about.
Yeah.
Just from a specifically hip-hop lens. And I feel like you have, even just in the short conversation, your through line, one of the through lines is that like DIY nature of just like, let me find whatever and build it myself. Would you say that going and getting Lada's tapes was the first time that you really like sought out a collection of something, even though you maybe weren't like consciously thinking about?
Yeah. I hear what you're asking.
Yeah.
It definitely wasn't, because I'd been collecting records for a while.
Okay.
But
gotcha.
I think it was the first time I really was intentional about like leaving my sort of safe zone of the world that I had grown up in.
That makes sense.
To seek something out outside of that world. And the welcome I got, it stayed with me. If I had gone in there and the people were annoyed with me and like, what the hell are you doing here? We're trying to sell 50-pound bags of rice. We don't have time to walk you through our tape collection. If that was the response, I don't know. I don't know how it would have played out.
Totally.
But, in many ways, and again, this is sort of like far behind me in some ways now, but all the work I've done has been propped up by the immigrant community of Indianapolis. Like the DJ work I did, they gave me a platform, they gave me a voice, and I try not to ever forget that. I really, I was alienated growing up in Avon. It was a very, we were a poor working class family in a middle class society in Avon. And I never fit in there. And I found a bond with immigrant people and other groups of people who were forced into what some might call the margins of Indianapolis. But I found that to be the place where there was life and excitement and real culture going down, as opposed to like whatever people did in Avon on a Saturday night,
Well, it's like people are truly
and the punk
living...
rockers. And the punk rockers.
Totally.
Yeah.
Well, thinking about that, it's like people living authentically as themselves, and like authentic in a way, especially probably at that time and even right now, like where for an immigrant to come to this country, like you got to work 4 times as hard to establish yourself and build that life that you maybe not want but need. And a lot of the things you do is out of survival, I've come to learn. And like you coming in there was probably like a bridge for some folks who maybe didn't have that same bridge. And I feel like if the roles were reversed, there would be a lot of barriers that come up. Just like what are you doing in here, or like this isn't the place for you, kind of like pushing to the margins again. And I appreciate just like the welcoming in and the do-it-yourself aspect, because I feel like it does carry a lot of that resonance and similarity to what like an immigrant experience might be.
Sure. And I heard your podcast with Hayes, your recent podcast. Yeah. And I appreciated a lot of the things he was saying, especially as the conversation went on, and he was talking about, the need to be DIY and perfect your craft, outweighing the need to have this major investment from the city. And I think he's dead on there. One thing he was talking about, he was struggling to kind of identify a sort of authentic cultural space in Indianapolis, right? Like you might see in Chicago or Detroit. And where I think the city, as it has done historically, shoots itself in the foot is completely negating, blacking out, ignoring, whatever term you want to use, the music scene that exists today on Lafayette Road and 38th Street, which is that authentic cultural space. There are a handful of venues and bars there where the biggest artists in Latin American music come and play on a nightly basis. This is by far the most healthy music scene in the city, and it doesn't need a penny of money from the Ephraimsons or the Indianapolis Foundation or the Arts Council. It exists completely on its own. I have seen iconic cultural figures play in abandoned Kmart's in some strip mall on that road, and it's existed for over 10 years now. This isn't something that popped up and disappeared. People, when I was working as a music journalist at Nuvo, people would always ask, like, well, what's the future of music in Indiana? And I would always say, it's the immigrant community that's here. And we're seeing that now. Who's coming out of Indiana that's really making moves? We have people like Omar Apollo, the son of undocumented immigrants who grew up in northern Indiana. We have a group like Los Aptos, a trio in Fort Wayne of young Mexican-American kids who are racking up millions and millions and millions of views. The city in a million years would never endorse a community of maybe undocumented people as the face of Indianapolis arts and culture. And it's a huge mistake. It's a huge failure of the city to really recognize what's happening here organically that could become an iconic part of our city, because of biases that are really shameful.
Totally. I work for Downtown Indy Alliance now, and so I'm like really focused on the downtown district. And I think something that I was aware of as I started to do conversation piece and talk and learn more about the city, but especially now that I work for this organization with its focus on the downtown district, is like I feel like we contain what Indy is to the mile square. And that has to be the face that we lead with. And I don't know that's helping us. Like you said, we're shooting ourselves in the foot by only focusing on a single area of the city to be representative of the entire city. Even more than that, but like the central Indiana region in general. And I'm interested in your perspective on like this space out on Lafayette Road on 38th Street is like thriving, has been thriving for a decade now, more than a decade maybe.
Even now with all the
Yeah,
persecution of immigrants.
exactly. And I'm wondering, like, to do so without an institutional, like, not handout, but like maybe even like lifeline. I don't know, something available from an institutional perspective. Do you think that if that were to encroach on that space, it would dilute it maybe, or be
No, you're
detrimental
100% right. No,
to
and I
the
think,
scene?
yeah, I think sometimes when we talk about what the city can do to promote arts and culture, I think sometimes the best thing they can do is get out of the way, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
at
yeah.
the same time, there are ways to provide support to
Right.
that community that could be meaningful, grow it, protect it. You know, look at Indiana Avenue. Much like this 38th Lafayette area, this grew organically. There was no investment in this. Eli Lilly didn't give them $10 million
Sure.
to, produce West Montgomery. This all happened organically. But what did the city eventually do? They bought it up, tore it down, moved the people out. There are things the city could do to prevent destroying culture,
Sure.
and sometimes that's more important than I think. Culture is something that has to grow organically. You can't invent it in a laboratory. I mean, the Chamber of Commerce promoting this Speed City as the official nickname of Indianapolis is just, I mean, the jokes write themselves, right?
Yeah.
And it would be
Yep.
funny if they weren't making so much money coming up with stuff like this. But yeah, sometimes the best thing the city can do is kind of stand out of the way. Cultural movements are often, there's an element of danger in them that
Sure.
attracts young people, whether that's hip hop or heavy metal. When I was
Yeah.
a kid, heavy metal was synonymous with Satanism.
Sure.
Young culture is driven by young people, and young people want to freak their parents out. They want to freak
Totally.
out everyone they hate,
Yeah.
who is telling them what to do and trying to fit them in some sort of box. And we need to let that happen. We
Yeah.
can't think that a group of out of touch people in an office downtown is going to have the $1 million idea to make Indianapolis this cultural mecca.
Yeah, very, like, I don't know if this is like the word I want to use, but I was thinking of like anti-establishment, essentially, just
exactly.
like, and like, again, I have a 2-year-old. He's already like, I don't want to do what you want me to do, Dad and Mom.
Yeah,
like, I'm
right.
over here doing this thing, and I can see like, and sometimes you do just got to get out of the way and like let them figure it out on their own. Like, don't run on the wet pavement; you're
Yeah.
gonna slip and fall. You can tell them that 100 times, but are they still gonna do it? Probably, and like you learn in that way, but to learn in that way is not to be a detriment to yourself. Like, you have to like figure it out on your own a little bit.
Yeah.
If an institution were to approach you and ask you to come in and help do something in terms of like, how do we, appropriately interact
Yeah.
with the creative community or the arts scene here, like, would that be something you'd be interested
Oh, I've done
in?
it before. Yeah. I mean,
Sure.
this left such a small impression. I mean, I can't remember the name of it. The Music Council, is that what it was called?
I'm not sure.
There was
Okay.
it was the Chamber of Commerce who
Okay.
sponsored this. They brought in this consulting agency to come into Indianapolis, do this survey, and make recommendations about how the city could support the music scene here. And yeah, it's just a lot of the things that I mentioned earlier came into play, like
Totally.
all the local folks who were part of this initiative wanted to focus on the Broad Ripples and the Fountain Squares. And when I would push back, and also a couple other folks, Jonathan Howe, who's I don't know how to describe him. He runs a recording studio called City Dump.
Oh, okay,
He's a very
yeah.
outspoken person. He's friends with Wild Style.
Yep.
Jonathan Howe and Wild Style were also pushing back on this. And when I was asking them, why aren't you going out to the venues on Lafayette Road, 38th Street? Why aren't you going to some of the historic black venues in the city? Well, we don't know them. We don't know how to contact them. It's like, just go knock on their damn door.
Right.
It's not rocket science here.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that was just like it's just a way to kind of like justify their ignorance of these things, to justify
Totally.
they don't want that. They don't want that to become the face of music in Indianapolis.
Yeah.
It's not what they want to promote. It's not what they're comfortable with. And that's a problem.
Yeah.
It's a huge problem. The musicians on Indiana Avenue faced the same thing during their lifetime.
Sure.
The blues singer Leroy Carr, who's, in my opinion, one of the most influential musicians in the history of American popular music, died in 1935. His work was never covered by the press here. He was considered a sort of bum. You know, he
Sure.
was considered someone who was hurting Indianapolis. And those same prejudices manifest themselves in new and different ways now. But it's the same thing, the same things that held Indiana Avenue back, which was the greatest cultural district probably the city will ever have, maybe.
Sure.
The same things that held that neighborhood back are still at play now in different ways and being applied with a more sophisticated kind of language and approach. But it's the same story.
So would you say that we've like made, do you think we've made like any progress forward if we're still creating the same barriers and like pushing back in the same ways, just differently in the way that we do it?
I mean, we've made progress in the sense that technology has changed and, people like me have more access to share information. People like you have more access to share information. So we have more tools to fight back and to get the truth out, and to not let a small group of people with very narrow interests control the narrative of the city's identity, to control the narrative of the city's history. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to start the program Echoes of Indiana Avenue, because I found that members of that community, the elders of that community, were not often given a platform to speak their history, their truth. And, I try to use these tools, this technology, to provide space for those stories to be told and to honor those artists in a way that maybe traditionally the city hadn't done. Except the Indianapolis Recorder, which is the greatest newspaper ever and documented that scene with meticulous detail.
Yeah. It's cool. The Recorder is amazing because I love that they've just like kept a very deep, long archive. I would not even have known to access it had I not started working for Downtown Indy Alliance. So silver linings. But like we were working on a project for Black History Month and I was just trying to find like photos, and it eventually led me to old like archived papers of the Recorder and just being like, oh wow, like there's still a record here. Because I feel like in addition to erasing literal communities, like part of that erasure is like make sure there's nothing even that you can find like written about this time. And I feel like the Recorder has done a great job of being able to just hold on to that and still make it accessible, even in spite of the barriers that continue to be put up to keep them from doing so.
Yeah. People who do work like I do, document this music history here in Indianapolis, we wouldn't be able to do that without those archives.
Totally.
There was a writer there named Bob Womack. He was also a musician, a drummer, who wrote for the Recorder for probably 40, 50 years. Without his work, Eunice Trotter, who's still with us, a great historian here in the city, without the work of writers like that, I wouldn't have any sort of compass or tools to approach that history. So yeah, definitely revere all the music journalists who worked for the Recorder over the years.
This might feel like a pivot, but I promise
That's right,
you it's not. If you were stuck on an elevator, who are two people that you'd want to be stuck on there with?
Oh my God, I'm terrible at questions like this, but I'll try not to screw it up. You know what? I'll pick people here in Indianapolis.
Oh, okay.
Michael Kaufman, who's a friend of mine, who he's sort of like the Wizard of Oz. He's like behind the scenes, but he does a lot of really important things and has created a lot of meaningful opportunity for people. I always I seldom get a chance to talk with him, but it's always like really informative to kind of bounce ideas off of him.
Totally.
And David Williams or Eunice Trotter. Let's say Eunice. I like Eunice. Yeah. She's the historian I mentioned who started writing for the Indianapolis Recorder as a teenager. And just she's one of those people that is a living encyclopedia of Indianapolis.
Sure.
She was also, I think she was the first Black female editor at the Indianapolis Star. She's a repository, archive of information about the city. And she just knows things about the city that other people don't, and that weren't public knowledge, and cool things. Not like, oh, this was the place where the first mayor of Indianapolis lived. It's like cool history that that matters, that's still relevant.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to ask you this question because as I was like doing some research and watching some of the interviews you've done, I feel like when people ask you like, who would you want to interview? I feel like you're like, oh, well, I've got a chance to interview these people. And, I'd love to talk to this person. You're like, and I have. And I was like, okay, this is awesome because like I feel like anybody who does media can probably find themselves an opportunity to talk to some of the people that come through Indianapolis. I think what what makes it special about what you do is that like you are not just a student of the game, you're a fan. And like I feel like you marry those things very well, and like it makes make sense for you to have the opportunity to talk to those folks, as opposed to maybe just some reporter who's like, I got to fill a story.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was wondering if you got the chance to sit down with Abida Parveen, what would you ask her?
You know what? I don't know. I would. That's a great question. You saw that
I did.
Instagram, right?
I did.
And I don't know why that popped into my mind that day. Probably because she was one of the musicians still with us that I haven't seen that I really would love to see.
Sure.
And, she performs this music. It's called Qawwali music. It's a type of spiritual music in Pakistan based on, the lyrics are based on a lot of like Sufi poetry and philosophy. And it's just filled with this very like deep and simple wisdom.
Yeah.
And she performs this music with such authenticity. I'd just like to have a conversation with her about that, about the and it's such an ancient music, but it still feels so relevant today. It doesn't feel like some antique from the past, and she interprets it in such a passionate way. And sometimes, she makes ugly sounds. It's not like she has this beautiful voice, that we might think of like, I don't know, Taylor Swift or something. It's a voice that's just like very worn with age and experience. And I don't know what I would ask her, to be honest. That's maybe why I wanted to interview her, But yeah, I have had an opportunity to have meaningful interviews with people. Most of my favorite interviews that I've done are with people no one's ever heard of.
Sure.
I did do one with Babyface where I had a tape that he didn't realize existed of original music he wrote at age 14.
Okay.
And during the conversation, I'm able to play that for him.
Yeah.
And just see him like be speechless.
Yeah.
There are a lot of moments like that. But another person I want to mention is Reggie Griffin. That's maybe one of my favorite people that I've ever interviewed. He was overshadowed by Babyface in the 70s funk band called Manchild. They were like a local supergroup. After the group broke up around 80, 81, 79, I don't remember for sure, Reggie went to work as a house producer and arranger at Sugar Hill Records.
Okay. Yep.
And became, in many ways, the architect of the sound of hip hop music as a studio product, not the Kool Herc African Bambaataa turntablism, but as a studio product. He did the beat for The Message by Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five, White Lines by Grandmaster Flash, worked on Apache by Sugar Hill Gang. That fame he got at Sugar Hill led him to produce I Feel For You by Shaka Khan. This guy is really... He's the first American to use the term techno on an electronic dance music record. He called his group Techno Funk. This guy is one of the real pioneers of modern music. He's from Indianapolis, still here today, doesn't get that recognition. And to me, he's sort of like a symbol of, in some way, of the kind of work I want to do as a journalist and how meaningful our music history is here in Indianapolis. We have produced artists that have changed the sound of music. I mentioned Leroy Carr earlier, a very influential songwriter and blues musician. So yeah, those types of interviews are the most important to me, with these local artists that maybe no one will even listen to these. They'll have 0 views on YouTube, but they may be the most important interviews I've ever done.
For sure. You mentioned like Babyface being just kind of speechless at hearing this quote unquote lost tape.
Yeah.
Are there ever just like reactions? Are people surprised that you are so well versed in their work when they come and sit down with you?
Definitely, because I interview a lot of, elders in the community who may have been retired for the last 20 years. And I'm bringing all this stuff up, and in some cases have recordings that they may not know exist.
Yeah.
So I think it's sometimes a little unsettling for people because it's a confrontation with a part of their past that they had forgotten about.
Yeah.
Or maybe weren't expecting to deal with. So yeah, it is a common thread in the interviews for people to kind of be taken aback by some bit of information. I embrace this, but I often hear the comparison to Nardwuar.
Oh, okay, nice. That's a high compliment, I feel like.
Yeah, I embrace it, but
I
try not to do the kind of novelty interview. If I bring something up from the past, it's because I think it says something about who they are as a person or the work they created.
Totally.
Not just because it's like, oh, this was your favorite toy as a child, or some of the Nardwuar gimmicks.
Well,
Yeah.
that's why I
He's
like
incredible, though.
totally. But that's why I like doing, I guess, long form conversation, is because it's not about the gotcha clip, I guess, and the age of social media. And I'm definitely somebody who has like tried to get clippable moments. And like I'm searching for those in the conversation. But as I've been doing podcasting for just the last 6 years and sitting down, and a lot of it has been like one-on-one conversations, I realized like it's just like, I don't want to just interview somebody. I want to be able to have a conversation, because in the conversation, it's like you can really not only understand that person, but for me as a host or a person as part of that conversation, part of that equation, I have people on that I really am fans of and enjoy, and I want to like celebrate that person in that way. And I think when you're having a conversation, you're able to do something like that. And especially for folks who have done it for a long time, never got kind of the shine that they deserve to get.
Yeah.
I think it says so much about like yourself, somebody who is willing to like know that, but not just be a student, be a fan.
Yeah.
And I think like people, I don't need the fans, I don't need the eyes, but it's appreciated.
Yeah.
When you know that your work has been received in such a way. And it's not about the numbers, it's about, are the right people experiencing this? And is it impacting them in that way?
Yeah. When my first job in music journalism was for Nuvo, which back in the day was the big alternative paper here in Indianapolis. At one time, it was on every corner of the city, the physical Nuvo newspaper. It had a big reach here in the city. And the music editor at that time he liked to write really nasty reviews of local musicians, and he wanted me to do that too. And I think, I needed the money at the time, so I didn't want to just like be like whatever and go in a different direction. So I think I did that once or twice, and I didn't want to do it, and I shouldn't have done it. It wasn't even that nasty, but there were negative criticisms within the body of the review, and I thought it was so stupid and pointless. Here are these people just like me. They're struggling.
Yeah.
And they're doing this. It's their passion. They're not making $1 million. They're not doing this for a fan base of millions. It's a personal statement that they're making and sharing. And I was like, journalism has to be better than this.
Sure.
And there has to be something more we can do with this. And since that kind of moment, I've been trying to figure out what that can be, what that can look like. And to your point, I think, I'm a fan first and foremost. When I started at WFYI, which was about 11 years ago, someone on the staff there told me I sounded unprofessional. And I took that as a compliment.
Okay.
They'd heard an interview I did with Jay Brookins.
Okay. Yep.
Who at the time was mostly known as a beat maker. And I took that as a compliment because I didn't want to sound like, the nightly news anchor.
Totally.
I wanted this to be like, this is deep reverence coming from me to the person I'm speaking to. Yeah. It's authentic. It's not, I wasn't gassing you up earlier. I really respect what you do and the commitment you have to this. I really respect that. And I agree with you. Something meaningful can come from this.
Yeah. Well, and it's just like, you find it, I find a conversation to be like a DIY project a little bit. I'm like, I want to be knowledgeable and know, but even when I have a framework for what we might be talking about, I'll say 90% of the time there's going to be 4 or 5 things that veer us off in different directions. I had an interview with somebody, with Murdoch, actually, Anthony Murdoch, and like I had a whole thing written out, and like I was like, I'm glad that I was researched, but like we went in areas that I had no idea. Same with Hayes. Like that whole first half of the interview or the conversation was, I had no idea we were going to talk about identity. I had no idea that we had so much crossover in the way that we kind of navigated up until we got to the college age, and I feel like those things can only reveal themselves if you're willing to just sit in the conversation and not fit so much into the established interview style of something, or journalism or media.
What I do is definitely, in my opinion, and I know WFII would need to hear this, but it's advocacy journalism.
Sure.
I'm advocating for something. I'm advocating for greater respect for artists. I'm advocating for greater respect of our history here in the city. And I wanted to use whatever platform I had to redirect the narrative to what matters, not just what the city wants to sell us or what the city thinks should be the next big thing.
Yeah.
And sometimes that means digging into LGBTQ history. Sometimes that means digging into white working class culture. Like Indianapolis used to be a hub for country music. And, as much as we talk about the jazz and rhythm and blues clubs of Indiana Avenue, there were honky tonk bars in every neighborhood in the city for decades. And this was really a center of country music in many ways. That history has not been told. It's not respected. Fountain Square used to have legendary hillbilly clubs, the Frontier, the Roundup, Fountain Square Tavern, Thunderbird, which still exists today, although it's not a hillbilly bar anymore. But yeah, I mean, it could manifest in many different ways, but redirecting people to what I think matters, to what I think has been unfairly written out of our collective history. And it is advocacy journalism, and there is definitely a point of view that I'm trying to share with the community.
Totally. Are there any advocacy journalism? I really like that. And it makes me think about a lot of like what Free Press and Mirror is doing currently. Is there anybody who were your like advocacy journalist influences, I guess? Were there people that you saw doing it this way and you were like, I want to try and do something similar?
Yeah, that's a great question. I love, in terms of contemporary media, I love Amy Goodman, Juan Gonzalez, Democracy Now! There was a tradition of underground newspapers in Indianapolis for like the Indianapolis Free Press. And back when I was working at Nuvo, this guy would just drop off these boxes full of these underground newspapers at the Nuvo front door for me, leave my name on it.
Oh, nice.
And that just opened up a new world for me. These underground newspapers wrote about things the mainstream media didn't, like the Indianapolis Black Panther Party, the different resistance movements that were happening in the city in the 60s. We always hear this narrative. There was no rioting or unrest in Indianapolis during the civil rights era. Bobby Kennedy came and magically healed the city after MLK was murdered, assassinated. That's not true. There were uprisings in Indianapolis. There were resistance movements here in the Latino community, in the Black community, and in other communities, in the LGBTQ community. Those are the kind of stories that I want to weave into the music journalism I do. Someone who was very influential on me at an early age is Howard Zinn, who wrote The People's History of the United States. I think recently I realized I'm kind of like trying to do like a musical version of what he did with American history in my own, simplistic, rudimentary way. I mean, he was such a genius. But yeah, that book, reading it at a young age, I realized that the sort of dissatisfaction I had with what I was hearing in school about American history wasn't, it was grounded in a far bigger truth that I knew until I read that book, and it opened up a new layer of understanding of American history for me.
Yeah. What do you think that, like, Indianapolis's music history says about, like, where does that fit into the greater kind of American project that we find ourselves in?
Yeah. I mean, obviously the history of Indiana Avenue mirrors things that happened all across the country in terms of the erasure of Black culture, the marginalization of Black voices. But beyond that, I do think that little neighborhood in Indianapolis pushed popular music in ways that most people don't realize. I mentioned Leroy Carr earlier. His songs are still performed today. The guy died in 1935. He was probably, next to Bessie Smith, the most popular blues musician of his time in the late 20s, early 30s. His musical partner, Scrapper Blackwell, a guitar player. I mean, Eric Clapton's songbook is littered with Scrapper Blackwell music. Gary Clark Jr. performs Leroy Carr's music in his sets. I mean, this music is still vital and relevant today. The Ink Spots, they were formed on Indiana Avenue by 4 Indianapolis kids, basically. They're the sort of template for The Temptation or Boys to Men, R&B vocal singing.
Sure.
The first records Elvis ever cut were Ink Spots covers. The Beatles, one of the first original songs they wrote was sort of an Ink Spot style track. Bob Dylan has named them. I mean, we're talking about like some of the architects of global popular culture who were influenced by this group. Yeah. Not to mention all the R&B vocal groups of the 50s that led to doo-wop and Motown. So yeah, I do think that Indianapolis, you can make a case, really laid a groundwork for the foundation of popular music in this country. And then there's all sorts of stories, like with Reggie Griffin, who I mentioned earlier, who was so influential at Sugar Hill in helping to craft the sound of recorded hip hop music, not the DJ culture or sampling culture. But yeah, there is an impact here. And it's not something that, for whatever reason, has been told in a compelling. I'm doing it. Other people are doing it.
Totally.
David Williams, shout out to David Williams, who's a historian who's written several books, but it's not being done in a way that's like elevating to mass awareness. You know what I mean?
The establishment still pushes it to the margin a little bit. Or it still operates in the margin. Maybe they're not pushing it consciously, but the way that they operate gets it over into that space. You mentioned the Beatles twice now, and I believe I read that you said that their first record that they did was actually produced out, or maybe not produced, but distributed out of an Indianapolis studio.
Yeah, no,
that's
great. It's Gary, though. Yeah.
Oh, it's Gary. Okay,
no.
Okay.
I love that you brought that up. Yeah. So VJ Records was a label founded in Gary, Indiana, in I think 1953. It was a husband and wife. Vivian Carter, who is the person I like to give credit to. She was a popular radio DJ in Gary, Indiana, and opened a record store and started a record label, a very humble effort in Gary. The early releases on their label, VJ, were all local talent in Gary. You know, there was a group there that recorded the song Goodnight Sweetheart, the Spaniels, which became, people still listen to that today. They had some huge hits in their early years. They eventually go to Chicago and expand their operation. Curtis Mayfield makes his first records there. Wayne Shorter records his first record. They had a very influential gospel label that the Staple Singers recorded for. And they released the first Beatles record in the United States. This like humble little black-owned record label out of Gary, Indiana, releases the first. They beat Capitol Records to the punch and released the first Beatles record. I'm glad you brought that up.
That's wild.
I love that stuck out.
Yeah, no, I was like, well, I think it was also in line with, because I forgot that you had said Gary, but that makes sense now because I think it was also with part of the interview. Who would you want to interview? Because I know Freddie Gibbs was on that list.
Oh, yeah, and he's not doing interviews on this tour, apparently, so it's so annoying.
I was wondering if there's like a most surprising collection that you've ever come across that really was like, oh, like this should not exist, like the dream. Like this was something I dreamt of, and like, oh, it actually is here physically.
Yeah. No, that's an amazing question. I love it because it speaks to the archival work that really is at the foundation of all the historical journalism I do. You know, I mentioned that early recording of Babyface. That came from a collection of tapes from a songwriter here in Indianapolis named Tony Black. He grew up on Indiana Avenue in Lockfield Gardens, was a fan of Curtis Mayfield's music and wanted to write his own songs. The first song he ever puts out into the world becomes a top 40 hit on the R&B charts. It's recorded by the Vanguards, the Temptations of Indianapolis, an incredible group. Tony makes one record after that. He only makes like he teams up with this local group called Revolution Compared to What, and they do a single. One half is his song, the other half is an instrumental, right? It didn't do well, so he's just like, I quit. He put out two records, two songs, and one of them became a top 40 hit, but he quit, he quit music. I became friends with his son, who's a DJ, Evan Black, who goes under the name Stylistic.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he told me, you should interview my dad, he has all these tapes. So I did. After his dad passed away, Evan got all the tapes to me. His dad had a reel-to-reel player, an old-fashioned kind of tape recorder, and just recorded everything, That's where the Babyface recordings came from. Babyface came to rehearse in his basement one day. He recorded it, just filed it away. I found a lost, in those tapes that Evan gave me that belonged to his dad, Tony, I found a Vanguards unreleased session. The Vanguards they're like ground zero for Indianapolis soul music, right?
Sure.
They put Indianapolis on the national map, the soul music scene here. So yeah, I love the group. I found this lost session in Tony's collection of tapes. The owner of Lamp Records decides to restart the label after 50 some years and put this out as a single.
Yeah.
So that, in terms of like local culture and lore, it's hard to surpass that. The first known recordings of Babyface.
Totally.
This lost Vanguard session. So that one was huge. And I'm still going through those tapes. There were hundreds of them. Hundreds. He had music on every media format you could imagine, too, from thumb drives to cassette tapes to CDs. Recently, this just came out of nowhere. A retired IPS shop teacher used to volunteer for a legendary jazz club that operated in Indianapolis during the 1980s called The Place to Start. He volunteered as a sound man there. Didn't make a penny, set up the mics, ran the board. He taped every concert with, and sometimes without, I think, the knowledge of the musicians. His name is John DiVincenzo. I found out about this collection, wanted to meet him, and it's just I want to donate them to you.
Yeah.
It's 350 tapes of primarily Indianapolis jazz, musicians who didn't record commercially, but who are really important culturally in our city's history. It's local musicians playing with iconic voices in jazz music. A lot of times back in the day, musicians traveled alone and they would just play with local bands. So yeah, that's a collection of 350 tapes that I got a couple weeks ago that I'm still going through. So yeah, I have had those moments, and it's just staying in the game, keeping your ear to the ground. You never know what's out there, you know. I'm not saying I'm the perfect person to get this archive, but this will really expand to another level the work I've done through Echoes of Indiana Avenue in terms of shining a light on our music history. It'll allow us to share. For instance, there was a musician named Errol Grandy. They called him Groundhog. He's called the Dean of Indiana Avenue Jazz. He taught Wes Montgomery and other prominent musicians music theory. If you go in front of the Walker Theater, they started a Walk of Fame in the 80s. And I think he was maybe the first or second star they put on this Walk of Fame. He never recorded commercially, but there are tapes of him in there. So this collection expands our understanding of Indianapolis music history. And I'm so grateful to John for entrusting me with this. So yeah, I've had those collections come to me that really I can't think of a better way to say it than they expand our understanding of our culture and history here.
Totally. Can you share kind of what your process is for going through a collection? And then is there ever a time where you feel because you're working on the documentary right now, that you feel okay, now's the time to maybe tell this story?
Yeah, that's a good question. Because it's something that really dictates the work.
Sure.
There are probably 20 or 30 things I'd love to publish about, but I don't have all the little components.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's years spent digging in record store crates and online to get an entire run of records from a local label. There's a handful of them right now I'm searching for. There was a label in Gary called Grecophone, run by this Greek immigrant who was releasing music from very specific to this island in Greece. And I'm once every 2 years, one of these records comes up for sale. So yeah, it's just tracking. There was a gospel label here in Indianapolis called Soul Lark that put out mind-blowing music. And it's every couple years, one of these records comes up on eBay. So sometimes it's getting the actual music, all the pieces, and nailing down bits of people's history. I spent probably 3 hours last night trying to find out the date of death of a local musician here from Indianapolis and just digging through as many databases and archives. So yeah, it's nailing down information, it's getting the music, and it's literally a process that takes years. And that may not come through on the show, and it shouldn't, and I hope it doesn't, but I'm glad I have the opportunity to work for a media outlet that values that kind of patience and supports that kind of in-depth storytelling and allows me that room and space to do it.
Well, it takes a lot of patience, and I think a lot of people would probably not want to take the time to do the unsexy work of digging through databases to find a single date, that to some may feel like arbitrary information, but I don't know if I would call it completionist, but at the very least mindful of the story you're trying to tell, because the story is about people.
Yeah. And
I think a lot of people are here for the story and less so for the people. And I think the way you go about it very much seems to me to be I want to be mindful of the folks involved in the story that I'm trying to tell.
Absolutely. And try to tell it with my limited abilities as well as I can. And, one thing that used to drive me nuts, if I was listening to the radio or even watching a documentary, is the host or the moderator of the documentary would talk about something, but they wouldn't play it.
Oh,
And I'm
sure.
like, play the
sure.
damn music. I want to hear it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I try to never do that. You know what I mean? There's sometimes you have to, but I like to have some, they say a picture is worth 1,000 words. To me, sound has that same value. Like
Totally.
being able to hear there's a record called Indiana Avenue Blues by a singer named Nina Reeves that was issued in 1923. It's one of the first blues records ever made. It was recorded in Richmond, Indiana. Nina played on Indiana Avenue with her pianist, Jesse Crump. And like to be able to hear that,
Sure.
that record, it's like it's taking you to this different place as opposed to just like giving a lecture and saying, this was one of the first blues records ever made. It's from this artist on Indiana Avenue. Being able to, that's essential to the type of work that I do, is like, even if it takes a decade, finding the record, playing it, and being patient to just sit back and kind of like, okay, I'm not
Yeah.
going to cover this until I have all the pieces of the puzzle to really put this out again to the best of my limited ability.
Well, I think I think especially for me, it's doubly appreciated right now because we are in the dawning of the era of AI.
Yeah.
Where people can now go even faster
Yeah.
to make a lower quality product. But for somebody trying to do historical tellings of things who want to find, like, I want you to hear what it is we're talking about. Like, some people would probably jump to be like, hey, AI, hey, chat, man,
Sure.
you
Right.
recreate this
And I see
thing.
people doing that, historians.
Ugh,
Yeah.
terrible.
Yeah.
I was wondering, and so I appreciate the patience because I think it enhances it, even if it's micro enhancements, the impact, I think, of the story to hear an original or at least as close to what you can get, what you can find of the thing that you're trying to play, the song, the album, whatever the case might be. What's the difference in how things were recorded before? You talked about the reel to reel and listening to that, to like more modern, like mostly digital sound.
Yeah.
Like, is there can you tell? I'm sure you can, but like, is there a pretty large gap between the way that those come across
Sure.
sonically?
I mean, I don't romanticize it in the way some people do.
Sure.
But yeah, there is a certain, I don't mind also the static. To me, that adds like
Totally.
flavor to the whole experience of like listening to an old 78 RPM record from the 1930s. But I mean, the technology is at a point where we can record this at your kitchen. It'll probably sound better than half of what we put out at WFYI.
It'll sound okay. I don't know about that. But
No,
it'll
man.
sound okay.
I mean, it's competitive. Let's put it that way. So yeah, I mean, I don't romanticize those differences because I grew up on lo-fi music.
Totally.
I couldn't afford to buy the pristine, original, mint copy of a record. I would
Okay,
buy
sure.
the dollar bin version and go
Yeah,
home and
yeah,
listen
yeah.
to the cracks and pops on the record. I came of age in the era of lo-fi music. Artists like, these are really obscure names I'm dropping here, but Jan Beck, he was a lo-fi artist from Texas, and Daniel Johnston, who was from Texas too, recorded music on a tape recorder in his home and became an influential songwriter that influenced Kurt Cobain. I grew up listening to that kind of music, and I love it. I love all the imperfections of sound. I don't gravitate towards more pristine sound.
Totally.
If that's not obvious from everything we've been talking about, all these old tapes and reel-to-reel tapes. But, you brought up AI, and I just want to say briefly that like the emergence of AI as a readily available tool for humanity has made me more responsible as a journalist.
Sure.
The work you
Totally.
and I are doing are going to populate what AI tells people
Exactly.
about our culture, our history, and we have to make sure we're doing it right. Every once in a while when I hit a dead end with research, I mean, this is the worst idea in the world. I'll say, well, let's see what AI can dig up. And maybe 1 out of 1,000 times
Totally.
it pulls out a gem. But yeah, I find that it regurgitates a lot of what I've published when it comes to very obscure
Yeah.
information, right? So it has just reinforced the need to really be responsible as a journalist, to make sure I'm doing everything I can to get the story straight, because kids are going to be writing book reports
Yeah.
on AI,
Sure.
and it may harvest some information that I've put out in the world, and I don't want to do it in an unethical or irresponsible way. Yeah.
Totally. I saw that you just had Naomi Pulver
Mhm.
on
Yeah.
Cultural Manifesto. I literally just discovered. I just like heard her
Sure.
for the first time because we have been activating Luger Plaza, and on Thursdays we do live at Luger, and so we have artists there. And she was one of the people playing, and she did a cover of Latch by Disclosure and Sam Smith that absolutely floored me. I could not believe that I was the one of 3 people standing there listening to this performance.
Yeah.
I was wondering, like, who else in the city, like, you're into right now or you've recently found out about?
Sure. And one thing I'll say about Naomi is, like, I'd heard some of her commercial recordings, which are beautiful.
Yeah.
I mean, they're so well done. But it was hearing a live performance of her that really made me want to feature her, because she is a really gifted vocalist, and,
Yeah.
and her guitar accompaniment is perfect.
Yeah.
You know, her presentation is really powerful. Like, I think after she performed, she brought her guitar and did a couple songs in just the most casual way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I told her it was like giving me like Jeff Buckley type of vibes, which is to me a huge compliment to
Totally.
pay. So yeah, she's incredibly talented, and I wish her all the success and luck in the world. You know, someone who I always point to, I try to, being a journalist, an advocacy journalist,
Yeah.
I want to really describe people in a way that I think is accurate, but also encourages people to maybe take an interest. But there's an artist here in Indianapolis named Hannah Ben, and I always call her the most important Indianapolis musician of the 21st century, maybe of all time. She's an incredibly gifted, brilliant genius. I've never met anyone that is as wise about music as she is, known personally.
Okay.
Hannah is a vocalist. She's a composer. The symphony, Indianapolis Symphony Orchestra, performed in, I think it was an oboe concerto she wrote last year. She had a piece premiered at Carnegie Hall recently. As a vocalist, she was on Michelle Ndegeocello's Grammy-winning album, The Omnichord Real Book. As a vocalist, she was on the Oscar-nominated soundtrack to Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Okay.
She's very, she's not someone who is trying to put herself out in a really aggressive way. So she kind of bubbles under the surface. I don't mean any of this to sound dismissive either. I hope it doesn't.
I feel
But
like
she's a genius.
I feel like what your lead in for her was like, I'm like, this is the highest possible compliment that someone could receive. Right
Yeah,
now.
good. I don't want it to sound at all like judgmental.
No.
I respect her so much for not like chasing any kind of notoriety. She puts all her passion and energy into the music she makes. Some of it's experimental, but it's almost like she's combining elements of like modern soul music with choral music from the 1500s.
Sure.
It's a sound that's completely unique to her. She's a musical genius here in the city that she should just put out a handful of things too that you can find. She has an EP on Bandcamp that's beautiful. It's a few years old now. Her partner, who's also someone worth mentioning, is a man named De'Anthony Parks, one of the most gifted drummers in the world. He's Andre 3000's drummer. He's currently on tour with Flea and played on Flea's most recent jazz album. He played on Flying Lotus and Kendrick Lamar records. He's played with Frank Ocean. He's John Cale from the Velvet Underground, one of these revered figures in music. John Cale's drummer. Just a musical genius, again, living here in the city that kind of just is under the surface here. But there's a very deep pocket of musicians here in Indiana. Jermaine Butler is someone else who I want to shout out. He's based in Bloomington. I think tomorrow is releasing. He's a hip hop producer, bassist, drummer. He's played in psychedelic rock bands. He's originally from Louisiana. And I think tomorrow or this week, he's releasing an EP rapping in Louisiana Creole, which is like
Interesting.
never happened before in music, according to Jermaine and my research as well. But I love what Jermaine's doing. Jay Lynn, she's from Gary, an electronic music producer. Whenever she drops an album, it's like immediately on Pitchfork's Best Of. It's immediately on NPR's Best Of. She's making this very forward-thinking electronic music that is again, when I was talking about Tito Puente earlier and the way the music just hits you so hard, and it has the power and energy of like punk music or hip hop, but it's done in this more abstract way.
Yeah.
Her music hits hard like that. So yeah, Jay Lynn, Hannah Ben, Jermaine Butler, people who I hold in they're among the greatest musicians alive, in my opinion.
Damn. Okay, I'm excited about. I have 3 people that I'm unfamiliar with. And
Jermaine put out an instrumental, mostly instrumental hip hop album called The South. It's on Bandcamp, but check it out. It's
yeah.
really cool.
No, definitely. I am definitely going to be tapped in because yeah. And like I really loved. Thank you for sharing that because I really loved watching you talk about these musicians who are contemporaries right now. Like it's like they're doing it now, and I feel like the way I watched you or the way I received that was the same way I received you talking about anybody who's come before, and who has left their mark and legacy here in the city. Like it's like I don't want to say reverence, but definitely respect. Like and to say like Hannah is one of the most important musicians
I
of the
will
21st century,
back
I'm
that
like,
up,
I don't
yeah.
know that like you can get much more complimentary of
Yeah.
somebody than that.
Yeah.
And,
when I
yeah.
met her, I did an interview with her right when I started producing the Cultural Manifesto show for WFYI. At that point, she hadn't released much. But again, the wisdom she had about music,
Sure.
just like it I was stunned.
Yeah.
You don't meet many people who carry that kind of wisdom with them. And she shares it in such a humble way. It's not like me getting up on my soapbox lecturing about the
Totally.
ink spots for 20 minutes. It's just done in this very organic and humble way. And yeah, I remember she brought some records to share, and it was just all over the place. She was really Marty Robbins, who was like
Okay.
an old time country and western singer
Yeah.
who had a beautiful voice. She brought one of his records. God, John Jacob Niles, this folk singer with this very unusual voice. She just brought this range of music to talk about, as well as like very lofty classical music. And she, in her work, can combine all these things with it. As I said, like kind of hip hop and R&B influences, and it's no one is making music like her anywhere in the world, and she's like a treasure here in the city.
Yeah.
And I'm glad the symphony invested in that last year, and yeah, in my limited way, I always try to elevate what she's doing. And yeah, it's part of this history. I see Indianapolis as an engine of musical innovation in the 20th century. Groups like the Ink Spots, Leroy Carr, the Four Freshmen were founded at Butler University, a group that changed the way people sing in jazz music. I mean, you could go on and on. Hannah's doing that in the 21st century. Jay Lynn is doing that in Indiana in the 21st century. They're part of a long tradition here of like visionary artists who the city and state may have slept on, but who, live in immortality through their genius.
Totally.
And, contributions.
have made their mark not just in the state but across the world. It sounds like so. Okay, so maybe you might have just answered this with Hannah, but I was
Sorry to go
wondering,
on
like,
so long, too.
No, never apologize. Like that's the whole point of this is just I just want to hear. I'm learning, like, and I really appreciate you sharing with me. I'm wondering who you think also carries the legacy of the city's music history well. Like who's doing that well right now? It sounds like Hannah's doing that, but yeah.
Indianapolis specifically or Indiana at large?
I think maybe both.
Yeah. This is maybe cliche to say because everybody loves this guy, but 4200 Corey, I think, is doing
That's always the
such
person that I think of.
incredible work right now. Like Skip, I feel like he brings together a lot of different pockets of hip hop, which is hard to do.
Totally.
The more backpacker side, the more street side. It takes a real genius to do that because those communities are often at odds with each other aesthetically.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
sure.
I remember when I was growing, I used to be really into underground hip hop during like the Black Star and days, Most Def. And it was like, I saw Black Star play and they had like a commercial street rap group. They're called the Major Figures, open, and they got booed off the stage. People would not even listen to a verse from this group. There's aesthetically, these are very diametrically opposed groups. And I think they've done something that few rappers do, which is unite these audiences. I love what he's doing. On a statewide level, I really think Omar Apollo ties together so much of our cultural history in Indiana. He can sing corridos in Spanish, but carry the history of soul music in the region with him, like the Michael Jackson, Denise Williams legacy of soul music in that region. You know, it's unique, it's special, you know, and he's just kind of starting his career. I know he's been at it for a long time. He made a record with Draco back in the day too, that not too many people are hip to. But I think Omar Apollo really ties together so much of our story culturally in Indiana. And I have reverence for what he's doing as well.
I love it. I have, I guess, maybe two more questions, but I definitely want to follow up on this because I think that's a conversation I have had a lot in the last couple of years is what can we build that will help to foster and facilitate this creative like talent, this underbed that we have here in a way that maybe isn't replicative of like bigger scenes in Chicago or New York or Los Angeles or like whatever these major hubs are, Atlanta, but like is I guess infrastructure for folks like Maxie and I, we had a conversation about just the lack of infrastructure and what he's tried to build with Nap or Nothing. And just like thinking about, would that be helpful? But now that I'm having this conversation with you, I'm like, I don't know that it is because we're already producing world renowned, not even like world class talent, not just like state class talent. Like this is like some of the best of the best. Like we talked about it before, a little bit earlier, just like sometimes you got to get out of the way. Do you think it's more of a live and let lie and let it just grow naturally? Or do you think there needs to be a little bit more infrastructure or investment in that way?
For me, if there's money to invest, I would love to see it invested in young people.
Yes.
And in creating spaces for young people, creating educational opportunities for young people. I think that's what we're really missing, especially with the crumbling of public school systems. You know, people often look back and ask why Indiana Avenue was this mecca of music and culture. A lot of it had to do with the school, Crispus Attucks, which attracted very high-level faculty, right? Shortridge had great faculty as well. A lot of important writers came out of Shortridge that had national, international impact. I think investing more in like sustainable music and arts education programming for young people. And again, it's not the answer anyone wants to hear because it's not solving a problem now. It's like, but we've betrayed generations of young people by allowing their ability to receive a robust education and arts education. We've allowed that to just disappear. And I think we have to plant the seeds there and let them grow. I think it's not like it's too late for Maxie or me or you or anyone, but I really would love to see more investment in youth programs and spaces. You know, I mentioned this punk rock collective, the Sitcom earlier. You know, that was so formative for me. And young people having access to those spaces where they can create freely is going to build a scene, you know?
Totally. Yeah. Well, I don't know what answer I was looking for, but I think that is the answer that not only I want, but I think a lot of people want right now is that even if they're not thinking about arts and culture in general, like that kind of programming, like that's infrastructure that already exists that we've just let go to the wayside. And even at the base level of just like getting our kids a quality education and giving them a good foundation to step into the world from, I think is really important. I think top of mind for a lot of people, especially within the city here. And so I think you're absolutely right. Like instead of thinking about, like I'm a big fan of let's stop building new stuff and just work on the stuff that's already here because I think we probably already have enough of it. And if we could stop building the floor, we could build the rest of the building. And then we would have the infrastructure to work off of. And so I think you're absolutely right. Like if we were willing. Yeah, the people that don't want to hear that answer are probably the people not listening to this show, but need to be listening, hearing things like that because, you know, the further we let that go, the more it's just from, I mean, for the black community, it's like, you know, school to prison pipeline. It's essentially the school to factory pipeline. Like that's where I feel like we're headed right now with public education is 99% of people end up just doing the memorization job that you want them to do and never moving up, never exploring their creativity, chasing their passion, you know? I think that's like something that we are, for whatever reason, building barriers in front of.
Yeah, yeah. And again, I've said a few times that like sometimes the best thing the city can do is leave something
Yeah.
alone. I'm going to reference Hayes again. I feel bad. I keep
No, it's
referencing,
great.
but I actually met him recently at Luna Music for record signing with a record I helped produce from Rapture, a funk band here in the '70s. And he was an awesome person, and I loved talking to him. He was talking about Trees and like,
Yeah.
what would Trees look like if you dumped $1 million into it? You know, I don't know if it would be better.
Sure.
I love the fact, like when the original Trees happened, all the energy and excitement around it was built around the local talent.
Right.
And people were excited. I mean, I remember a time, and still today, a lot of music journalism and local music, it's like promoting local music is like taking vitamins or like
Yeah.
eating your spinach. It's like this thing, this is a public service. Like, we know you don't really care about this. We're going to give it to you because it's good for you. It's good for the city. Trees was one of the first times I ever saw people truly excited and hyped to go see local music. And that's something that you can't create that in a laboratory. And having, $1 million, and I don't mean this anyway it's just offering a different perspective
totally.
on this. I remember Indiana Jones got involved with Trees, and he started bringing in a lot of like legacy hip hop acts. Ross Koss, who at one time was called the greatest hip hop MC ever, Black Moon, a really influential underground hip hop group. To me, that didn't add to it. Their sets
Sure.
were not well attended. The beauty of something like Trees is that it's getting people excited about local arts and culture in a way that $1 million couldn't. It'd be great for Oreo Jones to do this full time and get
Totally.
that, put that $1 million straight into the bank. But I would hate to see that money used to, and maybe that's what Hayes meant, but I would hate to see it used to dramatically alter the nature of the festival, which is a celebration of Indianapolis hip hop.
Totally.
And I love that they do bring in a few, like Mick Jenkins, I think was at the first Trees, and that was pretty incredible. I love that they bring those artists in, but the focus should always remain on the local people. And I think, maybe everyone should stand out of the way and just let that happen as it is. And he's got 11 years, and Indianapolis is not a place where music festivals thrive.
For sure.
Yet this has continued. So, there's a vision there that is pretty powerful.
Totally. Yeah. I think like the $1 million thing, I think it's very like people focused. It's not like you have to change it, but like if you didn't have to worry about the funding, like what could you do?
Yeah.
And I think like the
Totally.
conversation
And
that
I
Hayes
get
and-
that. Yeah.
No, totally.
I didn't mean this in any way to be like firing back at him.
No,
I hope
totally
it doesn't
not. Yeah. I
I'm
think
so
it was just
sorry
like-
if it comes off like
it
that.
was just like, I think this is like, because a lot of our conversation in that episode rested on like the culture or lack thereof, and like you addressed it beautifully. Like, it's not that we lack it, it's just that we don't know about it, and it's like it exists in pockets outside of downtown. And I think all of the perspectives on it are valid except for the ones that want to erase it, in the sense that $1 million is almost assuredly coming from an institution.
Yeah.
And the institution is going to have
Expectations,
ideas,
yeah.
yes, of how that money is used. And if that's where it's coming from, probably not a good thing.
Yeah. No, but I appreciated everything he was saying too. Like, that's
Totally.
why it stuck with me. I
Yeah.
don't mean this in any way to be some sort of, indictment of what he was saying. But, I'll say this through my perspective. If someone gave me $1 million, and this is probably an indictment of my own skills, but I don't know that my work would improve the quality
Totally.
of it. Like, and that's one of the things I love about producing radio shows is like, I can put as much time into it as I want to make it as good as I think it can be. And
Yeah.
It doesn't cost a penny to do that. There's a lot of potential in the medium that is often left, sitting on the table. I don't think $1 million I don't think it would give me $1 million worth of skill,
Totally.
of talent, of
Yeah.
ability to communicate and to make this material interesting. So yeah, I think sometimes that seems like a way to kind of level up quickly,
Sure.
a quick injection of cash. But I've always felt like, how can I hone my craft to the $1 million level
Totally.
and want to really zero in on what I can do better.
Totally.
And that's kind of what I meant maybe is
No,
like,
totally.
But Oreo Jones and Jay Brookins and Jane and everyone involved with that festival should be able to, make a living off that. A perfect way to sum this up for me was a music festival put on by a guy named Jacob Gardner in Fountain Square called Cataracts.
Okay.
This has been a while. It was like a psychedelic, like garage punk music festival that just happened informally at various houses in Fountain Square. And this thing blew up. It became this like major cultural moment in people's lives. It was illegal though, technically, right? I mean, they didn't have permits to
Sure.
do this, and all these teenagers and young adults are showing up to this. The next year, he was kind of, I think, maybe pushed into a corner to do it more legit. And they did it at Garfield Park. And it never happened again. I don't know. I was at that event. It seemed fine, but it wasn't fulfilling to him artistically. And again, that's why I kind of say the leave it alone approach is counterintuitive as it sounds, is sometimes for the best. You know,
Totally.
if you try to package and format something too much, it loses the fun.
Yeah, for sure.
It
takes
becomes
chips
meaningless.
away at the authenticity
Yeah,
of it, like
yeah.
the original ethos of why.
And it's fun to do something that, like, again, going back to the sitcom,
For
I was
sure.
like, we're not supposed to be here. If an adult walked in
The
here,
danger.
yeah,
Yeah.
They'd shut the whole damn thing down,
Yeah.
and we'd have to go home. And yeah, it's fun to
Yeah.
do things that kind of skirt the line between legal and illegal, and that drives a lot of like youth culture. And youth culture is what's going to create the next movement in
100%.
Indianapolis.
Yeah. Speaking of fun, what's got you excited for the rest of the year?
For the rest of the year, you know, I must be like a huge nerd, but like reading old newspapers, diving deeper and deeper and deeper into this work is fun to me. It's just
Yeah.
an endless source of fun, and digging deeper into these movements in Indiana, particularly, is just a never-ending source of entertainment and joy for me.
I love it. I can tell by the smile on your face that you deeply love it too.
And I know
So,
how sad that is to some people, but I don't. I mean, it's incredible. You
Yeah.
know? Yeah.
when you find what you love,
Yeah.
it doesn't take away from you. It only fuels you up. So, I guess it's the plugs time. Anything, or what do you want to plug? The shows, like,
Okay,
go,
yeah.
fire away.
I am on the radio several times a week. You can hear Cultural Manifesto Wednesdays at 8, Saturday afternoons at 3, Wednesdays at 8 p.m. You can hear Echoes of Indiana Avenue Thursdays at 8, Sunday evenings at 7. So plug that. There's going to be an album I helped produce coming out soon through Now Again Records in California from the Hamilton Movement, one of the most legendary funk bands in the history of Indiana. They recorded a song called She's Gone, which is an anthem in the Northern Soul movement in England. This music has never been reissued. Original copies of this record sell for $7,000. It's been bootlegged many, many times in Europe. I was able to strike up a friendship with their manager, and this is now coming out officially with his blessing. This band has so much lore, and I wrote the liner notes for this project, and you can learn about some of that. If you know the comedian Rudy Ray Moore, famous as Dolomite, who's a cult figure from the 1970s, they were his backing band for a while. And because of that connection, Rudy Ray Moore held the world premiere of his movie Dolomite in Indianapolis, which is this, you know, underground cult classic film that has had such a huge reach. So this is a band that no one really knows that well here in Indianapolis, but has left a huge mark on underground soul and funk music culture globally. So I'm really excited about that album coming out, having their story told through their manager, Dick Melvin's eyes, who is a incredible, brilliant person.
I love it. I love the work that you do, and I
Thank
think
you.
it's awesome. Like, you're doing storytelling beyond just the radio and the journalism. Like, you're able to bring some of these things to life in like the way that they were brought to you originally through the Sonics, through the albums, through the projects.
And just person-to-person conversations like this.
Totally.
That's where the history is. And, you know, people are sitting alone at home and have these stories inside them. And you know, I appreciate you for giving me this opportunity and so many other people in the community to get some of that out and share with everyone.
100%. Well, Kyle, I appreciate your time, and I'm excited to share this with everybody. I'm
Likewise.
excited for people to get the history lessons, for sure.
Yeah, sorry if I was getting on my soapbox too much,
Not at
Patrick.
all. I am the person that gets on the soapbox, so I love it when other people join me at the top of the box.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.